Alright folks, welcome back, week 3 of our class. I got your assignments graded from last week. There were some very good sketches in there, kind of studies of just these ideas in the first part of chapter 1. Ways you can create rhythm and balance and positive negative space interaction, all these kinds of things that you can do with just the basic elements. And really, the whole point of this chapter, this first chapter, is to just get you noticing these things and recognizing that everything, every object on a page and where you place it and all that kind of stuff has meaning behind it. And if you're aware of these things, of the meaning as a designer, it really helps you to have more control over what you're doing and really get your message across clearer. And that's the whole idea behind design. So, like I said, I graded your assignments, and I actually posted a PDF in this week's folder with a few examples that some of you did as all your guys' work that I just put together, and with a few notes underneath it, so you can kind of see what I was talking about, and maybe just, since we're not in a classroom, it kind of lets you see what some of your peers are doing. Maybe help get the idea across better. So, some of you were able to put them all in one file, and some of you weren't, and that's fine. I said, for that first time, it's okay. Just real quick, I want to tell you how you can do that in the future. If you take, say you have 5 JPEGs, you can combine those all into one PDF and just send that one PDF. And that's probably the easiest thing for me to grade, and also for you, because you don't have to upload 5 or 6 assignments, separate images. You can just upload the one PDF. The way you do that is in Adobe Acrobat. It's free if you don't have it on your computer. A lot of computers have it already installed, but it's free if you don't have it. You can download it online. But you go in Adobe Acrobat, you can, under File at the top menu, you can go to Create File, and one of the options should be Create PDF from multiple files. And then you can go find your JPEGs of your scanned images or photographs or whatever, and it'll create one PDF from all those files. Another way, if you're on a Mac, I don't know if you can do it on PCs or not, if you just select all your JPEGs and drag them to the Acrobat icon, it'll ask you, it'll say, we can automatically create a file for you. Would you want to do that? And you just click yes, and it'll do that. So this time around, try and do that, and if you have problems with that, if that's not clear, shoot me an email, and I'll give you a more detailed explanation of how to do that. So that'll be a little bit easier going down the pike. Real quick, this week we're going to finish up chapter 1. There's 3 sections: putting stuff into space, compositional strategies, and a foundation for meaning. And what this talks about, like we said, basically, no matter what, you have a space, no matter what you put into it, there's some kind of meaning behind it. And most of this stuff is kind of under the radar of the average viewer. Most of you can influence them without them even knowing it, based on where you put something, or the relationship of 2 objects on a page, and the size, and all these different things. And that's a lot to pay attention to. You don't have to pay attention to every little instance every time, but just to have these tricks in your arsenal really gives you the power to get your idea across clear. The first page on 62 of your reading assignment, I just want to read this. It says, space, the ground or field of a composition, is neutral and inactive until it is broken by form. But how does the designer break the space, and what happens as a result? Thoughtfully considering these fundamental questions gives the designer a powerful opportunity not only to engage a viewer, but also to begin transmitting important messages, both literal and conceptual, before the viewer even gets the chance to assimilate the content. It's basically what I'm saying. You can lead the viewer a certain way before they're even aware of what they're looking at, or before they've taken in that information. That's a very powerful tool. That's why it's fun to be a designer. But looking through this chapter, there are just a lot of examples of what happens when you put a square in the middle of a page versus at the bottom corner of a page, or a line horizontally or vertically, or horizontally or vertically. and all those different things. There are a lot of examples of arranging forms. You know, if you overlap forms, you can create this sense of depth. Because, you know, as designers, we're generally working in a two-dimensional flat plane. And so to really make this an interesting layout, you want to create this illusion of depth, or, you know, things are happening, things are going on, to really get people involved in what you're doing. Another way to do that is with asymmetry. I think I mentioned this the first week. You know, if something is symmetrical and centered in the middle of the page, you know, the viewer just tends to kind of glaze right over it, doesn't really pay attention. But if using asymmetry, and there's a good example of this on page 66. There's a magazine spread on the bottom of the page, where one page is an image, and then there's some text and a headline and another smaller image, and all these different asymmetrical elements really make it a more interesting layout, and it causes the brain to really examine it, as opposed to just, you know, if it was, you know, a couple objects centered on the page, everything's the same size. Your brain doesn't really know how to process it, so it all just kind of, nothing sticks out, so it just kind of looks over the whole thing and moves on. Whereas if you have a big picture and then, you know, a headline and a little bit of text and another little picture, your brain it takes a little more to process, so it might you know, look at something and it really examines the whole thing. And that, you know, is good, because it means it's going to stick in the viewer's head a lot better than if it's just a, you know, centered image on a page. For example, right now, you know, you're looking at me give this demonstration, and, you know, my head is probably relatively centered in the middle of the screen. Whereas if I did my whole lecture like this, it would be a little weird, because, you know, you're definitely paying attention to where my face is as opposed to what I'm saying. And that's just, you know, a kind of a compositional thing. So it's a little kind of a crappy example. But anyway, so there's some examples of symmetry and asymmetry, and kind of breaking the space. You know, whether you're creating rhythm or, you know, overlapping things to create this sort of. It talks about static and dynamic. Static being just kind of still and plain, not really doing anything, just kind of there. And dynamic is this, you know, really, you know, exciting movement that you can create. And that's generally what you want to go for, unless, you know, there might be instances where you want to create a static image, but usually to, you know, prove a point. So, you know, look over that. Talks about activating the space. Things you can do, whether it's using diagonal lines or a lot of little things around a big object that really kind of draws the viewer's attention to that big object. And there's a couple examples of that in the PDF that I posted from last week's work. Kind of ways you can draw the viewer's eye around the page, again, without them really even being aware of it, unless they're designers and they know the tricks too. So, let's see. You know, another way is bleeding things off the page. You know, if you have something where half of the image is off the page and half of it's on, it's going to give that sense of movement. You know, like it's coming from somewhere onto the page, like it's leaping out there. So it's just a lot of really neat kind of tricks that you can use to get your point across. On page 73, talks about some mathematical ideas behind this. Now, I went to art school. You know, I'm not big on math, unless we're talking geometry. But it talks about some mathematical principles that have been used, a thing called the golden section, which was used by Greek architects and sculptors. And you can read about that. Mathematical logic, musical logic, using, you know, 7 tonal pitches, and you know, that's just, it's kind of interesting. To me, that's more trivia. We're not going to be focusing a whole lot on that stuff, but it's just good to know. The law of thirds is actually really interesting, so read about that. And then it talks about, on page 74, there's some interesting examples of just using squares and, you know, basic geometric shapes, squares, circles, and triangles, of these different ideas that you can get across just by moving a few things around. There's one where distance, direction, you know, size changes, all these different things. So look at that.